'Tis the night for the 12th, 2024. The time is 5 minutes past 8, and there are very many threads, F1 centric threads, at which we need to pull today. We've got to talk about Ben Sulayem and his involvement potentially in getting Cadillac F1 approved and high-tech conversely rejected. So too, we've got to talk about Carlos Sainz, because all hope has ended of him driving a car commensurate with his not insubstantial driving talents. Checo Perez too. This story goes and goes because we hear more and more about this ambassadorial role. So too, the timing of Yuki Tsunoda's testing tomorrow. Let's see what goes on there. We will talk about it. Brad Pitt again. Spoiler alert, for everybody now knows what happens, because everybody saw what happened at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and the filming session between Brad Pitt, aka Sonny Hayes. So too, one Charles Leclerc and King George Russell of Kingsley Norfolk. Then we got to talk about Max, because it gets techie. Helmut Marko warning the four soon to be 5-time champion, some say, about 2025, because that season is going to get more techie than techie things. Let's talk about Mohammed Ben Sulayem first, because again, it's rancor and it's controversy and it's polemic each and every single time, because the legend that is Joe Saywood writes as follows: that there is business and commercial value going on in the background as far as why Cadillac F1 got approved so quickly. There is a dude who owns a company invested in Cadillac F1 doing well, who apparently is good friends with Mohammed Ben Sulayem. That apparently, in conjunction with the DOJ investigation and the timing of the Trump administration, expedited for the path of Cadillac F1 becoming an F1 team. And it gets even more techie than that, because apparently, if Joe Saywood's to be believed, and again for the avoidance of doubt, all F1 journos are created equal, but some are created more equal than others. Joe Saywood, one of the decent ones in my humble opinion. Joe Saywood writes in his latest newsletter that there are connections deeper with Cadillac F1, and this Mohammed Ben Sulayem fella, the head of the FIA, wants to talk about conflict of interest. Is he having a laugh? Let me tell you what Joe Saywood writes about this, because it gets techier than techie things. Mohammed Ben Sulayem has a brother, and by the way, his name was Ben Bin Sulayem. Changed it to Ben, according to Joe Saywood. Again, the reasons there are obvious. However, say all that to say this: Ahmed bin Sulayem, brother of one Mohammed Ben Sulayem, has made a fast fortune from developing a company called DP World. The company has annual revenues as at last year of 18.25 billion US dollars. Operates all around the world. Global container traffic is where it centers, and 82 terminals. It, however, has many subsidiaries, which again, many tentacles in many different commercial pies. In 2021, writes Joe Saywood, Dubai Ports, again a subsidiary of DP World, acquired the US supply chain company called Syncreon for 1.2 billion US dollars. This firm specializes in automotive supply chains and has worked with GM since 1963 to develop global export programs. In 2009, said company, Dubai Ports, owned by Mohammed bin Sulayem's brother, took over GM's distribution of part and vehicle kits for multiple models for shipping to assembly plants. Oh, and by the way, as if that wasn't techie enough for you, in October last year, Dubai Ports, again, the company owned allegedly by Mohammed Ben Sulayem's brother, acquired another company called CFR Rinkins to develop its services for containerized vehicle shipments from automobile factories in Mexico to the United States. This began operating in 2024 for customers Nissan, Volkswagen, and guess who? General Motors. Prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour. And if that's not bad enough, since we're talking about conflict of interest, how very dare you, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, leverage Susie Wolf's name in that? What are you talking about? As if that's not enough, Mohammed Ben Sulayem said, we've never favoured anybody as far as appointing them an F1 team. It's only because this application as far as Cadillac F1 ticked all the boxes, GM, and that's why the FIA approved it. It was only a matter of time before General Motors was going to be approved. I wanted GM in F1 because it's good for business. Joe Saywood sees Mohammed Ben Sulayem that and raises him this. Well, how about high tech? If indeed it's open season and we're just encouraging all entities and teams into F1, what about Lucky Sons? And High-Tech took exception to that, didn't they? They agree with me and you and said that this whole process is not fair, that there is more to this, and took the FIA to court. Joe Saywood writes that in that arbitration, the FIA were ordered to pay $3 million to High-Tech to cover its legal fees. Therefore, there was a judge who oversaw this arbitration process who agreed with High-Tech that the process around FIA allowing or disallowing, rejecting application to F1 to become an entity and or a team is unfair. Ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour. Oh, and by the way, Carlos Sainz, all hope has ended. We'd held out hope, even, as an F1 community, that this dude, as brilliant as he is, could potentially be in a car commensurate of his not insubstantial talents. Seen him all year. Yeah, he's not Charles Leclerc. He doesn't have that level of pace in absolute terms. Of course not. Who does? Of the other 19 on the grid, you could argue not very many, if any, but Carlos Sainz has a brilliant racing brain, and we all harboured hopes that the rumour, if indeed the word on the F1 curb is something in which you can be invested, that the rumour was true, that Carlos Sainz had a clause in his contract that said if there was an opportunity to go and race at Red Bull or race at Mercedes, that he could null and void his contract with immediate effect. I feel like there is now an opportunity at Red Bull, but the powers that be at the Bulls that are red just don't fancy this chap. PTSD settings, so reminiscent far too soon as far as the rancor between Carlos Sainz Sr. and Jos Verstappen, father of Max, in 2015 when both Carlos and Max were driving for Toro Rosso. They don't want him, and that all hope of that ended today when Carlos Sainz did his first test in Williams. The picture showed him in white overalls, Santander, a Williams' latest sponsor, and that has to mean something because Williams this year spent far too much money and again had to raid the coffers to bring spare chassis. You remember when Logan Sargent had to give up his car to Alex Albon? Again, all of that by dint of insubstantial financial resources combined with a cost cap. Oh, and by the way, spoiler alert, because if we're talking about F1, the film, Brad Pitt, aka Sonny Hayes, was caught post Abu Dhabi Grand Prix celebrating his victory with one Charles Leclerc and George Russell. Surely, if this is one of the most expensive film productions ever, surely they should have closed the fences. Nobody should see that because everybody now knows the endings, unless that was a dummy that they'd sold us all, that they'd filmed multiple endings, as any production worth its metal will do. The F1 world watches and waits to see what this F1 film is going to pan out. Is it going to be more Drive to Survive than it's going to be Grand Prix? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the interesting point. Oh, and by the way, Peter says DP World is sponsored McLaren is owned by... Oh my gosh, Peter. The rabbit hole goes deep, does it not? How much do you like pulling at threads that underpin this complicated web that is the weird and wacky world that is the one that F's? By the way, Checo Perez, this situation gets techie with Checo. He, speaking of threads, is hanging on by a thread. But we learned today, as reports are saying, that he has two options. He can fight and continue to get paid. In fact, I tell a lie. There is no way that Checo Perez is going to continue to be a Red Bull racing driver through to 2025, notwithstanding the fact that he has a contract in place. You've heard him say a gazillion occasions now when people ask him about his future, well, I've got a contract in place and my contract is ironclad. Antonio Perez Garibay, his father, has said similar things. If indeed Red Bull get their act together, he said over the past couple of weeks, Checo Perez, my son, can still win championships. Oh, the humanity. What was Checo Perez's dad smoking to be saying that? Against the backdrop of his material even, underperformance season to date. He has been nowhere. Now it's a dose of reality for Checo Perez. He's having to look himself in the accountability mirror and sip from the fountain of reason now. He's not been good enough. And Christian Horner, there is no way in hell in a month of Sundays that this dude is driving a Red Bull racing car next year. However, the ultimate outcome is still one of two. He's got the option, as Checo Perez. He can retire, nulls and voids his contract, go and be a family man. Do you know what I mean? Go and do something else. Spend some time with Antonio Perez Garibay, your father. He has options. Or another option on the table, which apparently is the most likeliest of them, is to cease the contract as it stands and go and become an ambassador. If, again, Checo Perez chooses to become ambassador, that means some Red Bull home runs, you know, those exhibition ones, travel America, go and shake some hands and kiss some babies. The rumour is that if he takes up that option, he won't see a massive drop off in his contracted figure. Ergo, the remuneration, the pay into Checo Perez's bank will be near as makes no difference, the same as if he were a driver, because for the avoidance of doubt, he has a contract. You don't just cease contracts. There is a payment to be made, and potentially that would necessitate Red Bull having to buy Checo Perez out of his contract. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, Checo Perez, if you're Christian Horner and Red Bull shareholders, his cumulative cost over the course of this season is doing one of these. It is exponential. Please see the $5 million that he's cost them in crash damage. Okay, offset that with the 20 million that he apparently brings in by dint of Carlos Slim's sponsorship, but then offset that in turn by the 20 million that he's lost them because of his not insubstantial underperformance, losing the World Constructors Championship. For the avoidance of doubt, the dude in the other RB20 won the drivers. It's not good enough. Potentially it leans into one Checo Perez becoming an ambassador and still getting paid as near as makes no difference what he would have gotten paid as a Red Bull driver. Oh, the humanity. The conversation switches then to who's up next. Liam Lawson, it sounds like, has the whip hand, the favourite to supersede the Mexican Minister of Defence. But there is a wrinkle in that story, being, of course, that Yuki Tsunoda is set to test a Red Bull racing car, the proper one, the one that Max Verstappen drives, on Tuesday. Helmut Marko has said already that they held conversations with all the seniors, the shareholders, the decision makers, Oliver Mintzlaff et al., Mark Mateschitz, Dietrich's son, that conversation would have happened today as far as the intended lineup for both the Red Bull Racing seats and so too RB Visa Cash Up, whose name, by the way, will change again going into 2025. That conversation was had today. However, no decision will be made just yet because ultimately, I think Yuki Tsunoda, for whatever the reason, his face doesn't fit. They don't want him in that team. Again, each and every single breath that comes out of Marko's mouth where he's talking about Yuki Tsunoda, it's all about what he needs to do. Oh, he's not consistent enough. He's not level-headed enough. Mental fortitude lack there of. Go and see a sports psychologist, Yuki Tsunoda. And why is this the theme? Because we know already that Yuki Tsunoda's outperformed roundly one Liam Lawson. 6 versus 0 in qualifying season to date. And again, when you look at their points haul, Yuki Tsunoda is outstripping Liam Lawson massively. Okay, so you can attribute that to his not insubstantial experience gap, advantage even over one Liam Lawson. You might do. So then surely give Yuki Tsunoda the place now, if indeed you're invested in meritocracy. Helmut Marko and Christian Horner believe, as at the time of writing, that Liam Lawson will be a better fit, notwithstanding his performance deficit versus his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. Oh, the humanity. Is meritocracy in F1 something in which you can be invested? I'm not too sure. And all this going on whilst Checo Perez's dad finally chooses peace over violence, issuing on social media the 2 contrite words. He said, "Gracias, Checo." Again, something of an admission that Checo Perez's career at Red Bull, if not as an F1 driver, potentially coming to an end. Oh, and by the way, we get the news that Max Verstappen was warned by Helmut Marko. The shift in focus, as everybody in the F1 community, Red Bull included, now cast their gaze at 2025 as far as a season. It's going to get techie, ladies and gentlemen. I watched the post-race on Sky Sports F1. And in a parting shot, they were all asked to predict who they think is going to win the World Drivers' Championship in 2025. Now, me being a Max Verstappen fan, I thought across the board I was going to hear Max, Max, Max. Across the board, almost to a man and woman, Danica Patrick included, they were all like Lando, Lando, Lando. If I recall correctly, on the broadcasting team, the internationally syndicated broadcast team, only Ted Kravitz said Charles, Crofty picked Max, Brundle picked George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk. All of the others, including Danica Patrick, Nico Rosberg, and so too Anthony Davidson, they all picked Lando Norris. Now, of course, their methodology is that Lando Norris's car, the McLaren, the papaya coloured team, are doing one of these as far as their speed. They've reshuffled now with a view to get the best out of Rob Marshall et al. And their car is doing one of these. FlexiWing innovation, genius innovations. They have the quickest car going into 2025, and who's to say that over the course of the winter, the gap between them and the rest won't become more substantial? So I understand it in that respect, but surely, I mean, you know who your Max Verstappen is, and you understand the rules of this channel. Thou shalt not back against Maximilian Verstappen as at 2024 going into 2025, unless thou wished to lose money. Do you know what I mean? We can't do that, but it is wrinkles and complexity. Long have I been very disparaging about Charles Leclerc, calling him the modern day Jean Alesi by dint of the frequency of his errors of the unforced variety. Now, however, you guys see the most recent evidence, right? Where have those mistakes gone? Cameron's got to eat some humble pie, because Charles Leclerc is becoming, in real life, the driver that we all know he can be. Gilles Villeneuve reincarnate. Please see your Exhibit A Monza this year. Monaco too. If you don't believe how good Charles Leclerc can be or is becoming, you only need to look at the first lap at this last race at Abu Dhabi. That dude looked like an absolute god. Ayrton Senna settings. It didn't even make sense. I had to go and rewatch that at least 5 to 10 times. He's moving like Neo in the Matrix. Of whom have I said that? About Maximilian Verstappen, of course. That's how good Charles Leclerc is becoming. So too now he has a mentor in Lewis Hamilton, who's every bit as quick as him in the race. Mr. Sunday. Scuderia Ferrari, therefore, will be super competitive next year. Lando is not going anywhere even, nor is Oscar Piastri. George Russell is coming on to now fronting up, facing down one Maximilian Verstappen, notwithstanding his 4 consecutive championships, back to back to back to back. But it gets techie, because Max Verstappen received a penalty, didn't he? Super license points. He now has 8, and Helmut Marko has reacted to that in real time. Reacted to the incident by saying, I think Piastri could have been a bit more space in the first corner. I thought that was a circumstance where the steward should have let them race. At least apply that thought to that circumstance. The Max Verstappen incident, turn 1 between him and Oscar Jack. However, Helmut Marko's warned Max Verstappen on the ramifications of getting additional points on his super license between now and next year. He said that we have to be careful going into next year. That Max Verstappen's reaction to the stewards, calling them idiots, saying, why don't they give me 20 seconds as a penalty? That wasn't very diplomatic. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Helmut Marko saying that. That's all that you need to know. I can't remember. I will count on one hand the number of times that I've heard Helmut Marko be critical, ostensibly, of his charge. The dude with whom he's gotten the most success. The dude who he brought to Formula 1 in the first instance. Maximilian Verstappen. And I think we could have ourselves a problem, Houston. Max Verstappen has 8 points on his super license going into 2025. Again, he weaponises fear in the other 19, does he not? Super aggressive each and every single time, meaning therefore he needs to watch out. If he gets 12 points on his super license, then that means a 1 race ban. And as things get more competitive, and all of the drivers and teams converge upon this zenith of F1 in the latter stages of this rule and reg spec. Every second, no millisecond, will count next year as far as the Drivers' Championship is concerned. Maximilian Verstappen, therefore, nor Red Bull can afford any sort of race bans, because that could cost them the championship next year. Helmut Marko is talking the truth. Does that handicap Maximilian Verstappen? C'est ce que plus, right? Plus ça change even. The more things change, the more things stay the same. But can Maximilian Verstappen continue to be so aggressive, knowing that another 4 points on his licence and he will get himself a race ban? Lest we forget, the first time, it's a 12-month rolling period. The first time Max Verstappen will have points roll off his existing cumulative total on his super licence will be at Austria. That, ladies and gentlemen, is 11 races time.